his own legacy through appointing his son. Could things improve for Cambodia? Or is this passing of the torch a further entrenchment of one-party rule? Well, joining me now to debate the future of the country are from Singapore, Cheon Vanarit. He is the president of Cambodia's Asian Vision Institute. From Rhode Island, Musukoa. She is the former vice president of the Cambodian National Rescue Party and the former Minister of Women and Veterans Affairs in Hun Sen's coalition government. And from Washington, D.C. is Sopal Ear, author of Aid Dependence in Cambodia and associate professor at the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. Thanks all so much for being with us. Sopal, I will start with you. For those who don't follow Cambodia, the recent headline could have come as a shock because this is a country that holds elections, yet here we are with a father handing power to his oldest son, and no one is particularly surprised. So have Cambodians long understood that this would be a family dynasty of sorts?
Well, it's always been discussed as such. I mean, in the sense of suspicions or talk of the son being the prime candidate for succession by the father's choosing. But of course, for the first 20 years after the UN came and organized Cambodia's first election, it was supposed to be a competitive democracy. There were real candidates, there were real parties running, and a relatively freer and fair and more credible competitive process. It's just that in 2017, 2018, things changed dramatically, and we have not seen real competition allowed because the main opposition party was not allowed, was dissolved by order of the Supreme Court. And in this most recent 2023 election, the main opposition party, credible opposition party, was not allowed to register.
So why even hold the elections? Is it simply to ensure that maybe they can prevent any new sanctions coming on?
I think there's a veneer of legitimacy from the standpoint of appearing to hold a process in which elections are supposed to be the culmination of a democratic process. Well, if you hold an election but have no democratic process, is it real? Is it still a democracy, or are we simply playing democracy or play-acting democracy? Is this a kind of virtue signaling where, hey, it looks like we have a competitive process, but in fact we don't?
Okay, let me turn to Cheon Vanarit, because you're actually very optimistic about this move. So what do you make of Sopal's comments?
Well, I think the power transition in Cambodia is taking place in if you look at the historical spectrum, it's over 500 years that Cambodia has not had any peaceful or smooth power transition due to the lack of strong institutions, and the development of Cambodian politics is very much personalized. So personalized political environment is very vulnerable to instability and chaos. So I think this is a critical turning point in Cambodian history over the past 50 years, that we have such a relatively peaceful and smooth power transition. So I think moving forward, the thing that they need to focus on to build institutions. So once we have a strong institution, so future power transition will be better in a sense that it will be more kind of inclusive, more participatory.
Okay, let me ask Musukoa what you make of that. I mean, it's at the very least a peaceful transition of power. Is there some silver lining there?
I totally disagree that it is a peaceful transfer of power. First of all, we should not call it an election at all. It is surely a political theater set up by Hun Sen for Hun Sen to put more strength into his politics, which is to strengthen his power, which is to transfer his power to his son, which is to further establish the dynasty of the Hun family. So we should never, ever even call it a election or a sham election. Therefore, if there is no such thing as free, fair election, then we should not say it's a transfer, legitimate transfer of power. I totally disagree with the word transfer of power, whether or not it is it is peaceful or not. How can it be for power when no one can speak? No one in Cambodia can speak. Therefore, the world should not play the new narrative of Hun Sen, which is to say that there is a transfer of power. They totally disagree.
And you don't only feel that this is all wrong, but that there should be consequences from the international community. I mean, that's an approach that's arguably been tried before, mainly via U.S. sanctions. It really hasn't worked. So why could it work now for the international community to take action? And how would they have to have an impact on what you feel is this tightening of power rather than any sort of peaceful transition?
I think this is the very first time that immediately after this political theater, that the U.S. has made a very strong statement, not just a strong statement, but action, which is targeted sanctions, visa sanctions, and suspension of aid, which is worth $18 million. But the U.S. alone doing it is not enough. It has to be a coordinated, targeted efforts of the signatories of the Paris Peace Accord. Professor Sopal said earlier, there was such a thing as a Paris Peace Accord that 18 plus signatories, including the major international community players, signed up to. These are obligations that need to be further implemented to move Cambodia truly toward a free, fair elections to start with and toward the real peace that the people of Cambodia are hungry for.
Let me ask Van Arets what you make of that suggestion. And I mean, and to note as well that many kind of foreign aid workers have really criticized the international policy toward Western-led policy, at least toward Cambodia, saying it's been quite dysfunctional. There are sanctions, but they still engage. It hasn't quite worked. So here we hear a call from the opposition to be more serious about sanctioning so that government leadership actually feels the effect. Do you think that would backfire?
I think we need to understand politics, how it functions, power politics. So power politics is about power maximization for survival and security. So that's quite a basic understanding of political development in Cambodia. It's about power maximization for survival and security. So I think all the political groups in Cambodia are doing that. I mean, a similar strategy. And with regards to the international sanctions, historically, it do not produce kind of concrete results as expected. So it's more as a symbolic. Let's say what happened in other countries in Southeast Asia, including Myanmar. So far, the situation remains very kind of chaotic and uncertain there, even though there's a severe international sanction on Myanmar. So we need to see politics as it is, not as it should be.
Okay, that's interestingly worded. So Paul, it's about survival and security. We need to see how Cambodia is and not how it would or could be. Is that fair? Is there a specific context to Cambodia that isn't being taken into consideration by the opposition and by foreign critics in particular?
Well, I think there's specific context in the sense that Cambodia is a country that went through a genocide, lost a quarter of its population, including my father and a brother. And so the international community does have a special responsibility to Cambodia. And it isn't simply to allow might makes right in the sense of power politics, right? It isn't to simply say that whoever holds the guns should continue to do whatever it is they're doing, because we've seen what happens when that was allowed. And it's so important in the sense of setting the right message for Cambodia that in fact, the investment of the international community in a country of currently 17 million people in terms of billions of dollars in foreign aid, in UN peacekeeping, in terms of troops on the ground, that they should not have done all of that effort for nothing. There was an expectation that not only would there be peace in Cambodia, but that there would also be some semblance of democracy. And what we've seen instead is, sure, there hasn't been mass atrocity crimes, but that shouldn't be the standard by which we should judge Cambodia today, in the sense of, as long as you don't kill a quarter of the population, you can do whatever you want.
If you could, though, help us understand better from especially from an outsider's perspective. I mean, how present is the trauma of the Khmer Rouge still today, and how much of a card is it kind of to be played politically to keep that arguable fear among the population, to give this standard you've described as the standard itself today, when people ignore the fact that maybe they don't have a choice at the polls?
I think it's ever present, in the sense that for most of the adults, at least my age, who are closing in on 50 years of age or above, we've lived through the trauma. We've survived it. And so the messaging is always going to be that unless you do as you're told, you're not going, we might return to the period of Pol Pot, right? And that's obviously a very powerful thing to hold over people. But the positive side of all this is that young people don't have that. They don't have necessarily that experience to hold them back and to create fear in them regarding change and regarding their aspirations for society. They're able to do the opposite of what George Santayana argued, in terms of those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. They haven't necessarily lived history, and therefore they can go a different direction, which is to say, they can say, hey, I think that our country should have more equality and less inequality, fewer Bugatti Veyrons on the streets while people are begging, right? So
they don't have that baggage. That's really interesting. Let me come back to Musukoa, because tell us if you think the actual inequality issues, that in part led to the rise of the Khmer Rouge, have they been addressed over the decades? We know there has been remarkable economic growth even, but has the genuine inequality really changed? Because there are some pretty, if I can say, shocking statistics actually out there. In fact, it's now stands at, according to the Asian Development Bank, 1% controlling over 16% of the national income, and about 10% controlling almost half the economy.
Exactly. Hun Sen has 5 watches, and each watch is unique, and costs over $3 million for one watch. Yeah, just Hun Sen alone. His cronies, business cronies, his family members own most of the businesses, own most of the land of the people of Cambodia. The basic human rights is about land. It's about respect and dignity and the house and the shelter that you have over your head. If that is taken away from you by the rich, by those, the elites, this is all about the elites. It has to, and we don't know the real unemployment rate in Cambodia because it's not given. But we know is that over 2 million young people in Cambodia are now illegal or legal migrant workers in Thailand alone. Over 2 million. These are human resources of Cambodia. I want to also add that in Cambodia today, although the youth did not live through Pol Pot. Yes, but today they live in fear. It's the same kind of fear that my parents, who also died under Pol Pot, lived under. The people in Cambodia are terrified because the police can come to you at any time, arrest you anywhere inside your home in the middle of the night without any arrest warrant, let alone if you are a member of the opposition party. So the fact that we are not in the Khmer Rouge regime, but it's true. But at the same time, we are going back to the year of terror. I am in exile not by choice. I am sentenced to 42 years in jail. And recently, my right to political activities have been taken away from me for 20 years. I have tried to go back to Cambodia to face this trial. If I am accused of being a terrorist or a traitor, let me go back and defend myself. I am not alone. The entire population of Cambodia live under this weaponization of the justice system. That is not the Cambodia that we want. That is not the Cambodia that the youth of Cambodia want. They have hopes. We have to keep up the inspiration, and we cannot, the international community cannot play the game of Hun Sen. He wants legitimacy. He cannot have it, nor his son. Mr. Hun Manet is not the prime minister of Cambodia. He does not come from free and fair elections. He is chosen by his father, but not by the people of Cambodia. That has to be clear.
Okay. Van Arit, I'm wondering what you make of both of our last panelists' comments. And I mean, if you still truly believe that Hun Manet will be different, and does being educated in the West somehow give him a different perspective? Or can the world realistically just expect more of the same, if not worse, as Musukoa believes?
I would let the facts and the realities on the ground to explain the next chapter of Cambodia. So to what extent he could deliver in terms of reforms, especially public institution reforms, economic opportunities to the people. So those are the facts that can prove his legitimacy. So we call it output legitimacy that will define his leadership. So I think it's still a bit too early to say on those reform outcomes. But I would suggest that we wait and see for, let's say, give him one year after getting to power and how he could deliver.
So, Paul?
No, I don't disagree. Not one more year, not one more day. Because he has stolen the hope of the people of Cambodia. One more year would mean more forests of Cambodia destroyed, cut, and given to the rich. One more year would mean our women, our children will be further be victims of human trafficking. One more year would mean poverty. One more year would mean our people in more debts. And one more year would mean Cambodia totally in the hands of China. That has to be clear. And Hun Manet just cannot get out of the shadow of his father. Look at it now. His father is not going away at all. And Hun Manet has had so many chances, even during the elections, to express his inspiration, his vision for change for Cambodia. He has not. To the contrary, he's said, he keeps on repeating that his duty is to his father, is to protect the legitimacy of his father. We have to take away this illusion that Hun Manet can change Cambodia, can establish reforms in Cambodia. The distraction by his father is way too deep. So Hun Manet have the courage. He does not have the courage. Hun Manet does not have got the courage, nor the ability, nor the experience to bring Cambodia forward. We need free and fair elections, and let the people of Cambodia choose the people.
We're down to our very last few minutes. So, Paul, I mean, should he at least be given a year to try to prove that he can be an agent for change and move the country forward? Or I'm interested in also what you think of what Sukoa was saying about being beholden to China now, because the international relations are a key aspect to how Cambodia progresses in that sense.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I don't know that we have a choice in the sense of it's sort of already under the control of or it's been set on the table as August 22nd, Hun Manet will be transitioned to this prime ministerial position. Hun Sen will become the president of the Senate and will serve on the Supreme Court or the Supreme Council of whatnot. And so there's while we can say this is not legitimate, this is not right, this shouldn't happen, at the same time, we will be able to see a year from now what he does do in terms of reform, if there are any reforms. So I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do and to give him the time to do all this, but we will, in the end, I think, be forced to observe what does happen. And that's obviously an opportunity to assess whether there are any kinds of reforms that do take place.
Okay.
On China, I think there's definitely a concern there as to the closeness of that relationship. I don't think you can see any more daylight between China and Cambodia in these times.
I'd like to be following up with all three of you within the next year to see where all of this is going. And I'd like to thank all three of you really so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. So thanks to you and our viewers, of course, for being with us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We will see you next time.